Self-control, impulsivity, overspending, not knowing when to say no. These are all things that would not happen or be limited if we just set boundaries when we have ADHD. If we set some kind of limits, some kind of rules in place, and maybe take a step back and think about the consequences of what you're doing. Because I wanted to go over the how and the why and things you might need to think about when you are setting your own boundaries. Now, your boundaries are probably going to be different than someone else because we're all individuals. And this is why I made this episode that is called Amazing ADHD Reasons to Set Boundaries for 2021. The absolutely amazing thing about boundaries is the rules. There are rules you set in place to stop you from being impulsive, stop you from losing self-control, stop you from overspending, stopping you from doing all the things that you don't need to do that you would do if you didn't stop and think about it. If you just jumped and was very impulsive and did all the impulsive things you want to do, everything that came to your mind, and quickly said, I'm going to do that, because you have no boundaries in place. So when you get that, I'm going to do that idea in your head, you're going to say, wait, there's a boundary in there. I can't do that because this rule that I set in place for myself says, no, I'm not going to do that. Boundaries act as artificial executive function for you. Because when you have executive function issues with ADHD, you're going to need something to help you. And that's why boundaries are good, to help you with your executive function. And they're like artificial executive function. They help you with self-control. Another great thing about boundaries is that it puts scaffolding on your limits, because when you have ADHD, you don't really know what the limit is. You don't really know, hey, this could be bad. This might not be good. I'm going to be impulsive. And when you get impulsive, it creates issues, right? So you want to have something there to kind of put guardrails on you, put something in place to say, look, don't go this direction. Stay away from this direction. Go the other direction. It's kind of like when you were young and your mom said, hey, don't touch the stove. It's hot. And you go try to touch the stove anyway. And she sees you trying to go touch the stove. And she pulls your hand back and say, no, don't touch the stove. It's hot. So it's kind of like that. Those kind of guardrails in place for you. Because when you have ADHD, you're looking at things that you can do that are impulsive, where you lack self-control, and you need something to kind of stop you. You need something to kind of say, look, don't go that direction. Don't do that, because it's going to be a bad thing. Because if you just go out and just do every impulsive thing you want to, then it could end up bad. Now, sometimes it ends up good, but sometimes a lot of times it just ends up bad. When you have boundaries in place, you can actually set up a schedule of boundaries, right? You can say, look, I'm going to do this time, this time, this time, this time. And now you have a schedule of basically boundaries, right? You have a schedule of, I'm going to do these specific things at this time. And that may be hard when you have ADHD, because you are trying to do a schedule. You're trying to establish a routine. Still a boundary, still one that's kind of hard to put in place. Another thing about boundaries is it makes decision making easier. And the reason, because of the fact that you have these boundaries, now you have rules in place. So when you're going to go do something, if you're trying to be impulsive, if you're trying to overspend, you can look back at your boundary and say, okay, I'm going to stop for a second and not do that, because that is not within my boundary. And so I'm going to stop, take a second, and go back and see if I really need that thing, other than just wanting it at the time because it's interesting, not wanting it 2 days, 3 days later, because now you bought it and had it and tried it and you're like, I don't really like it. I'm not really interested in it. I bought it already. I can't really return it. And then you end up with it cluttering up your whole apartment, house, whatever. And you wonder why you have it many years or many weeks or many days later. And thinking about it more does help with self-control, because self-control is one of those things that says, you need something in place to tell you when to stop, and boundaries do that. They tell you when to stop. They tell you when you might go too far. And this is the boundary you put in place to keep you safe from doing that. And the great thing about that, it also helps to keep you on track, because you might go off on a tangent. You have that boundary in there. You will not go off on that tangent that you're thinking about, that you want to do. You want to go on that rabbit hole, and you're thinking about it, or you want to buy that thing that's not in your budget that you really don't need. Then you realize your boundary is there, keeps you on track, going towards the right direction, going towards the things that you really need, going towards making the right decisions. Now, taking all this in, you need to set up your boundaries. You need to figure out what boundary you want to do and what is the one that you can adhere to, because it does no good for you to set up a boundary and then be like, nah, I ain't going to do it. I set it up. It sounded good, but ain't no way I'm doing that. So it does no good if you do that. You want to find ones that you can put in place, that you will respect, And those are the ones that you need to set in place. Now, if you want to do something hard and set up the one that you just set up and don't think you're going to do, then you can do that as well, because these are boundaries you're putting in place to help you, to give you that extra executive function. But you have to decide them. You have to figure them out. You have to understand, hey, if I put these in place, I can't just be all like, I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to respect them. I'm not going to even try. You do have to want to use them. Figure them out. Figure out which ones you want, which ones you can respect, which ones you want to use, and then implement them, and they should help. Let's be honest. When you start doing this, when you start trying to put these guardrails in place, when you start trying to put these boundaries in place, you gonna need some help. And I know I just got a little bit country there, but that's the point. You gonna need some help. And what I mean by this is you're going to need family members, friends, support groups, coach, whatever you want to use to be in your corner, to be the one to say, hey, you decide to put this boundary in place. You decide to do this. I'm here to help you. I'm here to say you can't go off and just veer off the boundary, right? You have to stay within the boundary. And I'm here to remind you to stay within the boundary, because when you set the boundary, you are setting it up because you have something that you're trying to change that is detrimental to you. And sometimes change is hard, and sometimes you need support, and sometimes those support people, support groups, coaches can be the best ones to help you with that. And then when you get off your training wheels, so to speak, you know how you ride a bike and you're in training wheels and somebody helps you along. When you get off those training wheels, so to speak, then you're okay. And then you may not need their help anymore. You may say, hey, I'm good. I've got it down. I don't need your help anymore. Thank you for all your help, but I am good. And then just like you ride your bike on your training wheels, you take off on your own. And now you have your nice bike ride of boundaries. Not sure where that came from, but you get what I'm saying, right? Next up is you're going to need stuff to help you, and not from just your support from friends and family and things like that. You're going to need external things that can help you around your apartment, your house. So for example, you might need clocks to be able to tell the time. And before I say this, not a financial advisor, or you have a credit card which has a $10,000 limit, and you, for whatever reason, just know that you don't have any self-control when it comes to credit cards. If you have a credit card, you will max out in a weekend. And so you put a much lower limit on that credit card, so you can't max it to that higher amount. You just call and say, hey, I want a much lower limit on that credit card. And then when you max that one out, you know that you maxed it out. You know that you're done, but you're not looking at $10,000, $5,000. You're looking at like $500, something like that. So you're looking at something much lower. And so it won't be such a surprise. You won't feel so bad because now you're like, okay, yeah, I maxed it out, but I only maxed out by this amount. I know that over this time I can pay that, as opposed to having a huge debt. And now you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I spent all that money. I'm not sure that I can return this stuff. Can I return it? I was just all impulsive and bought it. I didn't really need to. And then you're like, what do I do? And so you're at that part in that situation of, now I need to figure out what externally I can use. What can I put in place to help me stay within these boundaries? And let me let you know, this is not an overnight process. It's going to take you time. You're going to try, fail, succeed, try, fail, succeed. You're going to go through that process a number of times probably. And it's going to take time. It's just going to take time for you to get used to it, time for you to get used to the boundaries, time for you to implement. It's going to take time for you to get used to the whole process of having a boundary and not doing what you want to do in this situation or that situation, not being as impulsive as before. It's going to take time. You can't do it all in one night, and that's probably with anything. But with this especially, you can't do it all in one day. It's going to take trial and error and trial and error. And I know probably you hate trial and error, but it's going to take that, just be patient. I know with ADHD, it's probably not the best thing to say, just be patient. But with this, you just got to be patient. Not going to be an overnight process. It does take time. And if you think back to it, your parents probably did most of this when you were at home growing up, or one parent, or just whoever is the person that is responsible for you. They probably did this, right? They probably put these rules in place. These are my rules in my house, right? That's what it was. But they put it in place so that you had some sort of boundary. Especially with ADHD, you definitely need some sort of boundary in place. And so they did that. And you may think, man, I like those rules. I wanted to get out on my own. I want to do my own thing. But those rules were there to help you set your boundaries. And when you were home, they did that. They set the boundaries. They made you do your schoolwork. They made you go here. They made you go there. They made sure that you were on time for everything. And when you leave the home, you have ADHD and don't have that in place anymore, then you have to set that. And you have to figure all that out. And you have to plan all that. And that can be complicated if you haven't been doing it, if your parents have been doing it the whole time. And that can be quite an experience, especially if you have ADHD and you're not good at organizing, right? You're not good at doing all the planning and stuff, right? And now you have to do it all. And so that can be kind of overwhelming. That can suck, that can not be such a good thing sometimes. But you do have to do it. It is part of life. And when you have ADHD, you realize your parents did quite a bit of this stuff when you were home. Think about all the times your parents gave you these boundaries, all these rules, and how it prevented you from doing something that was bad or detrimental to you. And how when you got out and left your house and was not there anymore and was on your own, how you had to implement all this on your own and how difficult it may have been for you to do that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And before you go ahead and click the subscribe button for me, whether you are on YouTube or on a podcast app. If you're on YouTube, ring the notification bell, leave a like and a comment. Again, I hope that you have a great day, and thank you for letting me take up a little bit of your time.